being recorded and will be available in due course on the council's YouTube channel. Reminder the councillors to ensure that those attending virtually can hear the proceedings, and for the recording to capture the entire meeting, please ensure that you project your voice and speak clearly. Please remember it is a formal meeting and therefore do not refer to each other by first name. Okay, come to the agenda. Item 1, apologies please, Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. I have apologies from Councillor Warden.
Thank you. Item 2 is to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of April 24, members. Are you happy with that? Happy to move in second?
Chair, sorry, could I raise a
Yes.
point about the minutes? Page 5, item 3.
Which 5? I've only got 4 slides. No. Yes.
I can say verbally, Chair, it's just about the letter that we received from our local MP, which was a good letter, which was supporting the street lighting.
Street lighting.
But we also wrote to the Police and Crime Commissioner. Have we had a reply back? If not, can we please send her another letter?
I don't
because
think
it was
we
about
have.
funding,
We have not.
which I think is a bit naughty. I know she's been fighting.
She's been a
election,
bit
but
busy.
This has been going on a few months now, so I think now, if she hasn't replied by now, we could perhaps send the same letter again, asking her to reply. It's about funding, and the MP actually was in agreement with us and hoped
What's that?
funding could be found. So the funding lies with the Police and Crime Commissioner, so if we can prod her again, please, and see what.
Thanks, Kelly. That's okay.
Thanks.
Ask them to do a reminder. Thank you. So, all agreed? Oh,
Yeah, I can, obviously, we haven't had a response back from the Police and Crime Commissioner, but we have received some funding for ASB hotspots, which is going to be used towards street marshals. So
right.
there has been some additional funding that's come in for additional policing and also additional funding to target the hotspots. So Barnstable is receiving funding under Tier 1 for additional policing, plus also Tier 2 to go towards street marshals. So I think it's 25,000 from memory that we're getting for Tier 2 to go towards the street marshal scheme. So it's a contribution. It doesn't cover the total cost, but it will go towards helping additional street marshals in town centres and should cover at least perhaps 9 months of the new financial year.
Great. Thank you for that. Okay. If we vote, are we all in favour of the minutes? Thank you. Item 3, I have no items to bring forward, just to say that I am requesting that you agree that we swap around items 6 and 7, please, for some personal reasons. All agreed? And nobody's got a problem with that? Thank you very much. Thank you. Item 4, any declarations of interest received?
I've received none, Chair.
Thank you, Kelly. Item 5 is to agree the agenda between Part A and Part B. There is no Part B, so we carry on with, we go straight into item 7, which is planning applications, consultation process with stakeholders from water companies. I think the officers have had briefings, what sort of things we're looking at to discuss. Whether I think possibly we would ask the planning officers if they would like just to explain the process, how it is at the moment, what happened.
Was it that?
Yes, please, Tracy.
Yeah,
Thank
so every planning application for a new build development will have Surface Water being consulted as a statutory consultee. That will always happen and has always happened. I think there may be a slight misinformation that Surface Water hadn't previously been consulted, but they will always be consulted as a statutory consultee in any form of new build. They use from 1 dwelling to 100 dwellings, so they will be consulted. And equally, I think the planning department, including planning policy, we probably from the end of last year now have regular meetings with Surface Water. So if there is a particular scheme which is quite large, or we know that we've had some representations about the capacity of sewage, we would then discuss that with them. I have got Surface Water here with me, so I will bring him in, bring Surface Water in, because they know much more about how they look at planning applications than I do. I can only tell you kind of the process that we use. And equally, I think we have been having discussions with Surface Water that I think previously there was probably the consultee as much as generally kind of no objections, or they would maybe look at kind of the Surface Water hierarchy in terms of explaining that to us and what we should do. But I think what we have asked Surface Water to do, and I think they have taken that suggestion on, is that they kind of show us, kind of in the consultation response, if you like, how they actually, that they have firstly looked at the capacity, what they've done, how they've done that, and how they've come to that answer, if you like, rather than just saying no objections. I think there does need to be a little bit more of an audit trail as into how that process was undertaken. And I know there is, I think I spoke to Surface Water before, and they were sort of put into some sort of machine, but actually that would be really useful to explain that to the public, that actually that does happen. Then I think probably the consultation response, they generally said no objection, probably does need to go a little bit further. But I don't know if that kind of neatly brings in Surface Water, or if you want anything other kind of comments on the kind of how we're looking at planning applications in terms of the, that statutory consultee.
I couldn't bring in the members at this point. Is that okay with you, Tracy?
Yeah, cool.
Councillor Jones?
Just when you said that that consultation process could go further, could you elaborate on that?
So I think the consultation response in terms of what we're getting back from Surface Water, and I say I think it's something that Surface Water they have worked on, and they have thousands of that kind of applications they look at a year. They don't just look at North Devon, they look at huge, I'm sure Surface Water know the actual figure, it will be thousands. But actually, for maybe some of the larger applications, could there be a little bit more of an audit trail that the capacity has been looked at, and give us a bit more reassurance that, or the public reassurance? Yes, I don't think the consultation was, I think it's more to work on that consultation response. Say, when people are reading planning committee reports or reading something on the website from Southwest Water, they have that assurance that actually the capacity really has been looked at. And that is something we're working with Southwest Water. So we've always consulted, and we continue to consult. They're a statutory consultee, you would not be able to consult them. But I think what we're trying to work through is look at that consultation response and maybe make it a little bit more detailed. And again, we don't have a huge amounts of Surface Water because they're very busy, as we all are. But some of the larger ones, maybe it would be going on a little bit of exactly the process they've gone through to look at that. So then the public are aware that they raise concerns, and those concerns have been looked at, and actually Surface Water is confident that these new can be accommodating. And equally, I think we'll probably move on to the kind of the new local plan, and again, the allocations, it's also building that in early on in terms of if we're putting through allocated sites, making sure we've got knowledge of that early on. So hopefully that's answered the question.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I think members at this stage, it would be good to hear from Southwest Water as well. So if there are any questions or comments can be made to them as well. Ian, would you like to?
Thank you. So I've met some of the people in the room either tonight or at previous events I've been at. So my name's Ian Lake. I am Head of Development Services at Southwest Water. So that covers Devon, Cornwall, Bristol, Bournemouth, in some of our areas, but specifically around sort of the Devon area. So if we pick up on Tracy's point, just to put some context in terms of the planning applications we look at. So across Devon and Cornwall, we look at something like 30,000 planning applications a year. So it's obviously a significant number. Now, in fairness, they range from some small scale applications to the larger development pieces. Tracy talked just now around the machine. So we have a tool that we use. We've got what we call a supply and demand tool that we run applications through. So effectively, they're linked with some hydraulic network models. So to show the characteristics of the sewerage network, and we put those applications through that process. And that process will you know, in a lot of instances, say, yes, we've got capacity. In other instances, it will flag up concerns and things that we need to do on that basis. There's a further level of assessment that we will do. So we've obviously got the sort of the what I deem to be the reactive bit at the application stage. We've also got a facility within our asset management function within the company where we've got a hydraulic modelling team who do some very detailed hydraulic models, and that might be that we've got the information available already. It might mean that we then need to go out and put things like flow monitors into the network and really understand the characteristics of the network and how it reacts to rainfall and all the things that obviously you'll understand. So there are several different levels that we will get into in terms of our investigation process. I think as Tracy said, yes, we've had 3 workshops or 2 workshops now, and the third one planned in July, where we are trying to get closer to your officers to explain what we do and how we do it, which I think has been helpful, and certainly the feedback I've had has been that they've been well received in terms of that basis. But clearly around making sure that we can link and get our engagement, and as Tracy quite rightly said, maybe some of the more significant developments, I would be looking in a slightly different way at how we address those things. Yes, of course, we could put some more substantive responses back in terms of the application process. We definitely making moves to make that happen, not just in North Devon, but right across the region. And we've also, and it was as a catalyst actually from the feedback we received from Torridge and yourselves. That we've actually reached out to all of the planning authorities right across the region. I've got various different engagement meetings lined up with them, as you can imagine, that a lot of the things you say, are applicable right across the board. So I guess I'll probably stop that point, just to take a breath and to let people maybe just digest that and do that.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for that. Members, Councillor Newburn.
Yeah, thanks for that. I guess what you're talking about is your reactive approach to planning applications as they come in. I'm interested in how we will be looking at the whole water cycle. So supply, dealing with sewage, dealing with surface water runoff, dealing with flood risk as part of the local plan, and is in the local plan process, it's maybe not directed at you, but to other officers, are we looking at just sort of site allocations as they come in, or is there going to be some sort of water cycle study that looks at the areas that are most at risk, where the infrastructure is perhaps under pressure, or where there's spare capacity in the infrastructure? And leading on from that, in terms of the local plan policies, I know South West Water fund their infrastructure through borrowing rather than Section 106 agreements, but there is a sort of lag thing in that, and as part of the local plan, will we be looking at new developments, funding water infrastructure or drainage infrastructure or sewage infrastructure as part of that process, so that it's written in right from the beginning?
I think probably at this stage it's to bring in planning policy at this stage. Liz and SJ, is that okay?
Would it be helpful if I run through the process we go through?
Yes,
For a local plan.
Yeah.
When we prepare the local plan. So, as you know, we're in the early stages of doing that at the moment. And we're guided by what's in the National Planning Policy Framework and the associated planning policy guidance. So that's what we take our processes from. First stage, so there's different acronyms you've probably heard. We're currently working on a HELA, which is a housing and employment land availability assessment. And that's basically, we've done a call for sites, we've asked landowners, developers to put forward sites they wish to be considered in the new local plan. And then we also add in sites which we think may have potential as well. And then we go through quite a rigorous process, desktop process. We look at where all the sites are. If any sites are in the functional floodplain, of Zone 3B, they are immediately discounted. All the others, we look at lots of different aspects of the site, not just in terms of water, for highways, landscape, etc. And then we give them a rank scoring, so red, amber, green. And we send that information out to statutory consultees, and that will include South West Water. It does include South West Water, Environment Agency, and Devon County Council, who are the flood authority. So we're at that stage at the moment, and we're sending them out in batches because North Devon we've got about 200 sites, and the Torridge have got a similar amount. And we're receiving responses back, and we receive responses back from South West Water. They're at high level, but they are looking at different aspects of the functions they provide, and giving us some good feedback in that respect. So what we then do is we put all this information together, we go to a HELA panel, which is made up again of statutory consultees. They are invited to attend, plus representatives from other councillors. That's the Paris sits on the panel, and local developers who've got good knowledge, and then they go through and discuss all the sites and pick out any particular comments where they've got local knowledge, where they may have more information to provide. And then at the end of the day, we write all this up and publish it. That's one piece of evidence we do, along with lots of other evidence we gather. That feeds into what's called a sustainability appraisal, which looks at the different alternatives which are coming through, so we can decide which sites are the best alternatives or the best options to allocate in the local plan. All that information goes through. Then, as a council, we decide what sites should be allocated. Then we prepare a draft local plan. It goes out for consultation, both with our local communities and again to statutory consultees. So consultees such as the Environment Agency and South West Water have another opportunity to put their comments in. And at that point, they'll be able to see what our whole spatial strategy is, what we're actually proposing, what the levels of growth are, etc. Because at the moment, we're just saying, here's a site, we think X amount of houses could potentially be delivered here. And that's what we're.
Thank you.
Run through.
Thank you.
So just supplementary from that,
Yeah.
that still sounds quite reactive to sites coming forward.
So the question about will we do a water study?
Yeah.
That's an interesting one. So we're not a authority which has got scarce amounts of water. That's not the right terminology. But there are certain parts of the country where there are significant issues at the moment, certainly in the southeast, where it's critical at the moment. But we're looking at what evidence we need to gather currently, so it may be something we consider. Hopefully, yeah, certainly, because as you say, we don't want to be reactive. We want to do the best, prepare the best possible plan for the future, because this is a local plan is looking 20 plus years ahead. And I would say the local plan at the moment, stage we're at, we're just setting up thematic working groups for members. We've all been invited to be included, and there's one on climate change and the environment. So they're going to start meeting very shortly, and it would be a good opportunity to have those discussions and to say, where you've got concerns and where you think we should be focusing some of our work.
Councillor Petrinus.
Thanks. I mean, that sounds, eminently logical and obviously, a good way to go about it. But in terms of from South West Water, when do you, because this process is going on all over the South West, isn't it, in different authorities at different times. When do you change your infrastructure to allow for it?
So, that's a really good question. I was going to pick that up actually, in terms of the question you're going, the point was now in regards to sort of borrowing. To start, although our overall capital plan does work in that way, from a development infrastructure perspective and building supply or capacity into the networks, we have an obligation as a statutory undertaking to make that capacity available. As you quite rightly say, we are across a very large operating area, all of which the council across those areas have obviously got significant demands in their space. So it goes back to, you know, really what we want to try and do with yourselves in terms of getting a lot closer to not say influence, because we recognise we're one small part of a much bigger picture in terms of all the things, but actually start giving you greater information around where we have capacity already and where maybe that capacity is a bit more limited. And then subsequently where, and you know, the timelines for us putting that capacity in place. Now, what we are doing, and you'll have seen this on occasion, sure, is that we have the provision within the statutory undertaking provision to ask for a time period, for one of the better terms, so a time condition within the planning permission that says actually, you know, we can't permit any connections for 18 months, which is, you know, designed to give us the opportunity to allocate the money in our capital plan and then deliver whatever outcome we need to, so that actually the network is ready to receive those flows at that point. But in terms of our longer term planning, when you talk about your process, you're absolutely right. I was talking to some colleagues only earlier this week. We've responded to the phase 1 of the HELA process. We're currently working on our response to phase 2 of that process. But we've also got alignments, and I'm sure you've got visibility of these. I think we sent them to the council, both our drainage and wastewater management plan, which is our long-term plan around how our wastewater networks will be managed, and also picking up your water resource perspective, our water resource management plan, which similarly does the same. And that's a long-term projection based on making sure that we are able to provide the services we can. So those are there's some genericity, so you can pick up that on our website. So we can put those two things into our website. I think previously, and apologies, some people weren't there, but I've given a link to that. It's a previous presentation. I'm happy to share a presentation I've shared with Torridge and North Devon previously, which has got those links in it. So if you're going to go and find those links, and the officers have got more details. So they're effectively in different stage levels in terms of granularity within those information. So that will give you that view. So I hope that answers the question. It is a challenge for us. It's a challenge for us in areas where there is restricted capacity, because obviously what we need to make sure is that we don't, create environmental harm part of that day.
So, can I just clarify?
Yes.
Literally understood. I mean, it sounds from what you said, and I may have misunderstood, but a good deal of it, because you mentioned planning conditions that might say, wait 18 months before you do anything, you react.
Yeah, no, sorry, I probably misled you on that, so apologies. We have an obligation as a company to make provision for growth. So we are looking at North Devon and all of the other councils in terms of understanding what their growth projections look like and where that growth is going to occur. And we have capital planning processes where we have investment allocated for those areas. I guess the challenge with that is around the timing of those developments and when those developments actually go on. Because if you recognise the duration of your local plan, obviously there is a series. So what we want to try and do is get a lot closer to the council to understand how that will unlock. What we do, and it's predominantly around, so we engage with our development customers significantly, particularly around the national house builders. So we hold them almost on a key account basis. So we meet with them regularly around what their plans are, recognising those guys are actually unlocking these sites to be able to understand what their time looks like, to try and get to that stage where we can, not in a reactive space, but be in a space where we understand when that growth is required. Because the last thing we want to do, because our funding is limited and we don't have limitless funding to be able to fund all these things in one go, is to make sure we can prioritise that on a proactive basis. Then there's a scenario where on a more reactive basis, if something comes in, so if there's something allocated or something changes in its profile and we need to step in and do something about it, that's when we'll start asking for some timing clauses and start to give us the opportunity to make those provisions.
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Bushell and then Councillor Jones.
Obviously you've heard the feedback from our water quality meeting, where obviously the public and the residents and the holidaymakers are up in arms about the overflows that go straight into watercourses. And it's very important for residents that they have leisure time throughout the year and the tourists when they come down to visit. Is there a way in which you can discharge into reed beds or willow plantations which would then stop the discharge going straight into the sea. Because with one hand, last year, we were on a hosepipe ban, and with the other hand, suddenly we were discharging waste into the sea and into the rivers. And the two don't seem to line up. And I wonder whether we could maybe you could purchase some land. So rather than going straight into a river, you could go into a bed, which would then mitigate at least some of the harm that is done to the waterways.
So that is one way. There are lots of ways of potentially addressing that challenge, as you will, I'm sure, appreciate. You know, it's a significant challenge. You know, we're not going to shy away from the fact that we, you know, as an industry and as a water company ourselves, we've got some big challenges in this space. We've got some very ambitious plans in terms of we've just put our business plan to Ofwat, our regulator, and it's our largest capital investment plan by some margin. I've worked with the company since '96. It's definitely the biggest one I've seen, almost twofold in terms of previous business plans in terms of investment that would require. A lot of that investment, not all of it, but a lot of that investment is focused on overflows and the impact of overflows. The government has a 2050 target with regards to reduction of overflow spills. We've got a target, and we've set ourselves a challenge to deliver that requirement by 2040. That seems quite a long way away, but you've recognised the number of challenges that we've got. So, you know, we have to prioritise that, and we're looking at the moment. So our big priority for our bathing waters and water courses going to bathing water areas. You know, but there will clearly be a priority process as part of that. You know, ideally we'd like to do a lot quicker than that, but we need to be realistic in terms of that investment process, how customers can afford that transition on that basis. But don't get me wrong, you know, your provision with regards to discharges into reed beds, discharges into other treatment facilities, absolutely, there's a whole way of this, and we've got a what we know as our playbook in terms of how we assess discharges and how we assess the best way of addressing those.
So you understand the contradictions of having a hosepipe ban, also using the waste overflows, and at the same time giving massive dividends to your shareholders. And you can understand, obviously there are mechanisms behind this, but you can understand why the people are very upset with those three things happening all the same, because they all seem to contradict each other.
So don't get me wrong, with respect, probably we're going to talk about planning rather than our policies, but I'm going to answer the question you just asked.
We are.
You know, in terms of our wastewater networks predominantly are impacted by rainfall, and the impact of rainfall and the more intense storms. You know, we are now getting through climate change, not in its entirety, but that's the majority of the challenges. We did have a problem, and we did have some challenges with regards to water resources, which we then put back at the end of 2022, which was the result of, you know, a very long dry summer, a very long dry winter that preceded this, and a very long dry summer that preceded that, and therefore a sequence of events occurred that left us with some shortfalls both in Rowford and in Holyford, which we've now addressed. And I'm, you know, pleased to say that both those reservoirs are 100% full at the moment. So, you know, it's good news. And don't get me wrong, you know, we've made a lot of investment in that space. You know, again, you know, I don't sit here and shy away from the fact that the rainfall has definitely helped us. So, you know, let's be clear, I understand that principle. But about a third of that recovery is being directly as a result of the investment we put in place to get them water around in different ways. And with the graduate, I'm not going to answer the different policy question, because I think, you know, we'll have to have a conversation with you about it, but I think now is the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Jones?
I won't lull on that point, but in one conversation we talked about not worrying about water scarcity, and then in the next conversation talking about the fact we had a drought situation and capacity issues for a long time, and that we actually had a hosepipe ban. So there's a bit of a contradiction there. But just the context, what we're really hoping to get out of this meeting, we had that big public meeting, and what really came out of that at the end of that meeting was this pressure from the public that this can't just be a talking shop. We need to be discussing ways that we can actually have a positive influence. And I really, really hope that in North Devon we can drive that. We can drive potentially things that can be rolled out nationally, and how, even if that means we're going to discuss policy that becomes might be challenging to enforce, or might be hard to actually put things in place. We need to start shaping what we want things to look like. And with that in mind, when we're going through that consultation process currently, to what extent is capacity of the existing sewage infrastructure actually discussed? Because my understanding is it's covered, but it's kind of not to a huge, is actual what extent, what percentages is that in those conversations? And to all of you, what can we change? What can we do? What can we put in our future plan to take a positive step in the right direction of making change in North Devon in relation to that?
I don't know who would like to answer that one.
Okay, so at the moment, I said we're getting high level responses back from our constituencies in South West Water. This is the very, very first stage. So then when we go through and we select sites, potential sites, that's when we're going to have much more detailed conversations. And don't forget, a local plan has to go through an examination, and there'll be a planning inspector there to go through all the information. And we need to demonstrate with all that technical evidence that these sites can be delivered. And I'll let you come back in on that one as well, if you've got anything else to add. In terms of being dynamic and being forward thinking, North Devon Parish Councils, we're part of a pilot scheme at the moment, pilot project, which is being funded by DEFRA. It's called Devon Resilience Innovation Project, RIP. And it's looking at flooding issues across Devon, across local communities where not necessarily there's a high volume of residents, so we wouldn't use traditional flood defence mechanisms, etc., because of the viability. But what we're looking at in terms of planning is we're looking at preparing policies related to, it's got a catchy title at the moment, we need to change it, fluvial change risk management areas. So basically looking upstream at land uses and where issues are arising further down the system, and how can we in a local plan influence that, and what policies can we put in place? Don't have any yet. We're at the very early stage of it. We're just scoping the work with some consultants at the moment, but it's something we've got funding to do, and we're very keen to look and see if we can be proactive in that way. And again, hopefully we'll bring members and working with our parish town councils and our local communities over the next couple of years. We're sort of gearing up now to start doing that during the summer. And depending on when we can start on our local plan, but hopefully we can have these conversations and we can be as proactive as possible.
Thank you, Liz. I'll bring in Sarah Jones.
No, that's fine. So just following on from that DRIP project, that work will be through the massive working group through the local plan as well. So as part of that working group, we'll be looking at and keeping you updated with that project. I think it's really exciting. Just coming back, Councillor Jones, to your point on capacity and when that's discussed, that's the very reason that we've consulted that water, is to understand whether the infrastructure that's in place can cope with the growth that we are looking to put forward in the local plan. So, and that's really important, because if there's additional infrastructure required, then we need to understand how that impacts on reliability of the delivery of that land. Because if the infrastructure required is so much, then that can't come forward. It's not deliverable, which is what we're trying to test through the consultations, is what land here is deliverable. And as I say, if the consultees are telling us there's this constraint, and actually collectively the scheme isn't viable as a result because it can't be addressed, those upgrades can't be put in place, then it falls away. So that the consultation that we're doing with South West Water should be rigorously testing that.
And is that how regularly is that a conversation?
Well, once the local, that is when you then get to adoption stage. So through the examination, the inspector would similarly be wanting us to see the evidence that we've carried out, to say that yes, we agree, you've gone through the process, the consultees have confirmed that this land is deliverable, and at that point, the land is allocated, the plan is adopted. Now, at that point, that land is adopted. So, South West, the consultees would need to be confident at that time that on that position, it would then post that, the land is allocated, it's not tested. So it's got to be right through that local plan process. Now, I'm not aware of any issues through the current allocations. That's a conversation, that might not be the case, but that's as I understand it. Now, through the new review of the plan, again, we go through that process again with South West Water.
So maybe a misunderstanding, but just on the same point, if I can. My understanding is on particularly large sites, it's only in the planning stage that when capacity is then deemed not to be, I might be completely wrong, so correct me if I am. It's only in the planning stage that mitigation is taken to put in alternative means to either release that waste at different times through different systems, or action is taken to mitigate the impact on the system, or as an example, sewage works are pumped out on a much more regular basis because capacity is hard to define. Because if you send 3 lorries there every week to empty it, you can get more capacity from it. But my understanding is a lot of that is happening post-build or at the actual planning stage, not at the actual consultation stage.
I think there are a number of things in that statement.
Yeah.
And without knowing specific details, so you talk about tankers, for example. So one of the reasons why tankers will go into sewage treatment works isn't to take sewage away, it's to take the sludge deposits that are a byproduct of the process, which is designed into the process. We take that. Often we use that as in terms of some of our CHP engines, so we actually use that productively to generate energy for ourselves. So that's a natural byproduct of the sewage treatment process. Some of those tankers you're talking about, there will be occasions where our sewage works come under pressure, and yes, there are scenarios where we can on time balance that with regards to tankering to other sites. We have an environmental requirement, that is absolutely we're held accountable to by the Environment Agency with regards to, our discharge back into the environment. So, the clean discharge from a sewage treatment process that takes everything and puts it back to clean water. So we've got permits and we've got the ability to do that as part of the natural process. There are scenarios sometimes when our networks get overcome. And that's when the overflow scenario that we will talk about hits into place. And there are, strategic overflows on networks, which the alternative to that, and don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting for a minute this is acceptable in any shape or form, is that people probably flood. Obviously it's that balance between that process. Now, the reality is, we've got a program, as I said just now, to reduce the operation of those overflows. But without, in terms of a sewage treatment plant, we have capacity within plants, and generally speaking, we know exactly what's in what plants on that basis. They're in our drainage and wastewater management plans. We know what we've got in terms of headroom in all of our sites to be able to accommodate the new growth. Where we've got some of the strategic things you're talking about that are in the plan, we have, as I said earlier on, we have capital programs in place to put capacity in place in advance of those. Sometimes that's difficult in terms of the timing, but that's definitely what we aspire to do to make sure that's available in advance of the development coming on board, so that we can actually mitigate any additional environmental impact of those sites.
So how many sites in North Devon were turned down? Sorry. Just a finishing question. How many sites in North, and you might not have the answer here, but in terms of that planning process, how many sites were taken off of the plan because of capacity of sewage works? And how many sites through the planning process are turned down because of capacity of sewage work in North Devon? Well, Devon as a whole, because I imagine the figure is probably 0.
So I guess to put, so excuse if I mean to. As a statutory undertaker, under our obligations as a statutory undertaker, we have to facilitate growth. So the obligation is with us to make the capacity available to facilitate growth. So we don't have the ability to decline applications. We can make recommendations around timing, we can make recommendations about the planning authority. The reality is, in terms of the drainage from development sites, is actually the responsibility of the developer to present a suitable development drainage plan, which will work. Now, we're obviously more than happy to help with that process. Obviously, we speak to developers, so we talk to developers often before they come to you. So they'll come to us, engage with us and say, okay, fine, we've got this, how can we address this? What do we need to do? Now that might be around adoption of the assets, it might be around what they're going to discharge and can they, is the capacity there? And if not, what we need to do to make it happen. So what we try and do with our developer customers is try and facilitate a process which aligns and actually arguably make the planning process quicker. Now, I'm not suggesting, easier. I'm not suggesting it always occurs in that way, but that's what we try and do, which is a difficult balance for us to strike. I couldn't tell you how many, as a council, came through from the plan provision, in terms of that turning down. But what I will say, in terms of your plan, the reason why we're engaging and we engage in the process is we want to try and get to the stage that we understand what your growth needs are in the area, and then we can accommodate those growth needs. And we will put whatever time we need to into that process. So we just say, at the moment, we are at almost stage one of that process. As we go forward, we'll get into some greater level of dialogue, and a commitment from me on behalf of the business. If you need us sat in workshops, if you need us sat in rooms, we'll be sat in those rooms, working with you all guys to make that happen.
Councillor Petrinos.
I mean, the process leading up to the local plan, the future local plan makes entire sense to me, and it's obvious. What I don't understand though is how significant the difference is about the process that's going on in the plan that we're going to adopt in the future with the one we currently have and the one before that, and one before that. Because as Councillor Bushell mentioned, despite these local plans and despite, I would assume, would have been consultations at the time and listening to South West Water and getting assurances from them about capacity, we know how dissatisfied people are with the result. So is there a significant difference in what we're going to be doing in the future to what we've done in the past? I mean, and how much of it, is there anything we can do, or who can do something? I don't know.
Can I just say, I mean, having been involved in, I don't know how many local plans, in various levels, this is a completely different feel to the process we're going through at the moment. And we've got these thematic groups that can tackle these bigger district and cross two district-wide issues. And I'm a bit disappointed at some of the response from members, because we haven't actually been knocked over by the number of people volunteering to come forward to them, to be honest. This is the stage where members should get involved, not at the other end of the process. And so I'm keen that members get involved in those thematic groups who can tackle the sorts of issues you've been talking about tonight. But I chair the HELA panel, and I can give you an assurance that the only thing the HELA panel have done up to now is to look at all the existing sites within the local plan. They gave us the evidence base so we could defend our 5-year land supply. So a really, really good exercise. The panel were really helpful in that process. We'll go through some. So our next step is to look at the new sites, and I can just give an assurance that these sort of issues with capacity, both capacity in terms of infrastructure of both sorts, will be right up front in that process. And so we can give communities the assurance. The other thing that's different now is under this new process, communities can do an exercise without going down the neighbourhood plan route to look at their priorities and get involved in the local plan process. I think there was a feeling with the last local plan is we got to a point almost by accident. Then we had an inspector that changed some of our policies that affected how communities felt about the plan. We're going to make sure that doesn't happen this time. But we are waiting for more government guidance. We've got this gateway that we need to get to and get approval within to kick the formal process off. But what we've been talking about it in the last couple of weeks, whatever happens, I think we want to get on with the HELA process because we know we're going to need some more sites. And otherwise our 5-year land supply will be challenged again and again and again. So within that process later this year, I can just assure members that any sites that have been looked at, and I think the earlier the HELA, it shouldn't be a private sort of meeting. Those sites that have been promoted or been looked at should be wide. I mean, the last local plan, the SHLA process,
was regarded by a lot of people as being allocating of sites. And I think the sooner we get the HeLa sites out to the communities and to all members, the better, so that we can have their input as well, because it's the process goes wrong when people end up at the other side of the process thinking, how did we get here? And I think there's a bit of a feeling about some of that process before, particularly in bigger villages and the rural bits. So I mean, I'm chair of that panel, and I can give you an assurance that we'll make sure that we share all that and that we deal with those infrastructure issues up front in the next few months.
Anything else from planning officers that you'd like to bring?
Thank you for Ian coming today, and I think the difference probably now is we are engaging much more with South West Water than we ever used 20 years ago. And I think South West Water recognise that and really stepped up. So I think, we do need to thank Ian for coming, and also I think South West Water recognising their role in that capacity issue and working with us much more. I say we have a 3-monthly meeting that we can bring up any applications that any objectors have made, issues with capacity, so we really can unpick that, and that didn't previously happen. So I think things are being learned, and I think we are definitely working much better with South West Water, and hopefully that will then communicate to the public that we are, we're not just hiding behind any objection. We are really looking to work more closely with South West Water.
Thanks for that, Tracy. Yeah, we do appreciate the attendance of Ian from South West Water. It's really helpful. Councillor Lever, then Councillor Maddox, please.
Thank you very much for coming along. That has been really helpful. The session we had at the end of February, the public session, that there was an enormous amount of public interest in that. And I think that somebody there promised that we would feed back to the public on the results of that. I think, bearing in mind that there are other topics that this committee is going to be looking at over the year, I think it would be helpful to have something that just sort of encapsulates what the district council and most of that is planning, either planning policy or development planning responses to the issues that were brought up, just so that we can put that out in the public domain as a sort of concise document or a concise bit of messaging. I don't know, something in the next couple of months. But I mean, most of it, I think, has been covered in answers to questions.
Another questions, wasn't there?
Yeah. And I think, we didn't have anyone from planning district council on that board.
They put on that day.
But
was that on storage or no?
No, but this was something that it was the end of February. But I mean, if it is possible to put something together that can go out through the comms team, I don't know, in July or something.
Yeah.
That would be really helpful.
Yeah. I think at that point, I don't might necessarily answer the question, but following the sessions, the joint sessions that we have, I wrote to Hannah Smith, there were a number of questions that came out of that. Some were local questions and some were more general questions. I recently wrote back to Helen on that, so we've had permission, I'll be more than happy to share that. I mean, it might just not necessarily put it in the public domain, but it might just help to some snippets that you can take out of that to use in a document.
Thank you.
I'll just get that. I'm sure she'll be fine with it, but.
Yeah.
Could I bring Councillor Maddox now, please?
Yes, message to Tracy. Would it be feasible for you, after you've had the meeting with the water company, to then at a planning meeting to give us feedback or
if there are certain applications that come to the planning committee, and obviously we have had liaisons with South West Water, I'm more than happy to share that and to unpick that, particularly if there is objections on capacity issues, I can give you that comfort, I guess, that actually that has been discussed with South West Water. I'm more than happy to do that. And that would be for you to challenge me on, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
If there was objections on that point.
Yeah. And a question to Ian as well. So when you get an application and you look at it, would you do a flow monitor on the sewage pipe?
Where we haven't already got that data, yes. So we hold a number of hydraulic models, so effectively network models that are already underpinned by flow data that we've collected over a period of time. If we haven't got that, then absolutely we'll gladly put flow monitors in the network, and I was looking to our colleagues today to try and get it in a network elsewhere in the region for that exact purpose. So, yes, we absolutely can do that, and we do that regularly because it's important to us.
So you do it every time, or just?
Not every time, as I say, often we don't really have the information available to us, and so therefore, the models are mature enough in our terminology that we can run them as is. But there'll be other areas where we just don't have the historic data set behind them. You imagine all of the wastewater networks that we operate under. And therefore we need to go and do some more bespoke type investigation, and that might be flow monitors, it might be connectivity surveys, it might be what we know as impermeable surveys, so effectively all of the impermeable areas that are running into networks, which, make a massive issue to us in terms of capacity. And, there are a lot of factors that come into that, but yes, we regularly are out there with monitors in our systems.
Councillor Jones?
Yeah, thank you. So just one taking from it is it's complex, isn't it? Because in one way, because of the 5-year land supply issue, we're kind of over a barrel, aren't we? Because if we question anything too hard and we start ruling sites because we don't want to be pumping waste into our streams, we end up in a situation where we could end up not saying no to development popping up in locations that we don't necessarily want, which is always a bit of a challenge. But I think it's really, the question is that from the overall subject, in terms of, we're a policy committee, so is there anything, for all of you, is there anything that we should be looking at in terms of adopting, changing, thinking about, in terms of policy, where we can have a positive impact on this subject?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly what the local planning review will do, is it will be looking at these issues. The thematic working group will challenge us on many of the issues that we've discussed today. And the local plan, ultimately the local plan will then set the spatial planning policy for the district moving forward. So that will be setting the policy. So all of this will need to be looked at through the local plan review, and there are challenges that you're making to us around the sewage infrastructure in particular, and the challenge that we need to work with South West Water in terms of infrastructure capacity and what that means moving forward. So yeah, absolutely, the local plan review process will do exactly that.
And sorry, just adding to that, obviously we've talked a lot around our engagement around, allocated areas. We would love to work with you to start helping to share some of those things that we would like to see in policy around water efficiency, around surface water management, around all those things. We would love to work with you. We would love to try and get them built into your process as part of this, because there are a lot of things out there that we can do, and then we can really, I think, make a massive difference. And this, to me, is part of our engagement. It's not just around the allocations, because the reality you said just now, we don't actually want you to get to the point where you have to turn down allocations. What we wanted to go to do is to understand where we are and try and help facilitate that process. And that's really where we are. But there are a number of things that I think, we look at climate change and the impact of climate change, both from a resources and from a intensity of events perspective. There are a lot of things in there that we could, I'm sure, really make a difference on by I'm going to say, you may choose to adopt some of them, you may choose not to adopt some of them, but we would like the opportunity to sit down and actually properly engage with you on those things.
And that's the process that's going to happen. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, can I just come in?
I have three. Oh, yeah,
Just
go ahead.
Councillor Jones, that's the question I had. I think that's a change of process, because that's something that we haven't done before. The thematic groups, the challenge of the local plan in that way is something that obviously is refreshing. The public meeting we had at the end of February, which was well received by the public, I think demonstrated how those different stakeholders have an appetite to work together. We weren't going to achieve this individually. And I think the engagement between Tracy's team and South West Water and other stakeholders is something new that's happening now that obviously wasn't happening so much in the past. And I think that's refreshing, but also that's important moving forward, because now that is further challenge for policy that you're talking about. So I think the teams have moved a long way from where they were before. The public meeting, I think, obviously has brought that to the forefront in terms of working together. A lot of work goes on between these teams that probably isn't communicated maybe as well as we need to show. And it's getting that message out there to the public and the stakeholders that we do want to work together.
That's right, thank you, John, yeah. I do have 3 more members that want to ask questions, but could I ask you to be quite succinct, because as you know, we do have another subject to discuss. So I'm going to take you, I don't know who's first, I'll do it alphabetically, so councillor Bullard first.
Okay, just a quick one, really, councillor, you were involved in the original SLAR process, weren't you? Is this HELA process more detailed, in fact, because I seem to remember the SLAR thing was just allocation of sites and there wasn't much detail looked into them when they were allocated, whereas now it seems to me that you're going to find more detail if you're consulting with South West Water and places like that. Were you doing that in the past?
Yes, the SLAR is a piece of evidence which feeds into which sites we decide to allocate. So it did look at in detail water capacity, did look in detail at these issues, but it is still, as I said earlier, it's at a higher level. I didn't look in detail, but it is at a higher level. And then once the decision is in terms of, because the local plan isn't just about building houses, you know, it's about making places, it's play shaping. And so once we've got our strategy in place and we decide in the level of growth that is required, the amount of employment, etc., then we go into more detail, potentially commission more evidence on particular sites. So the HELA process is relatively similar, but it does include employment lands as well. But it is the very first stage of a lot of work. So it's the very first stage of a process. So yeah, it's the starting point basically.
I mean, so previously were you consulting things like South West Water when you did the original one we're in now?
I mean, the problem, Chair, was that the SLAR happened years and years and years and years before the plan was adopted.
Yeah.
Under the new legislation, you're supposed to sort this process out in 30 months. Mm-hmm. So that's why I'm saying is that all the evidence that's in the HELA wants to get out quickly to make sure that we can carry communities and members with us and get extra input into the process rather than the SLAR that was put over there for years and years and years while the process dragged on. We'll be able to do it this time.
Yeah. So Chair, we will publish the HELA later this year, which is about the same time as we start on the new local plan process. Yeah. So it will be out there.
Thank you.
Public domain.
Councillor Bushell, please.
I think we've polarised the debate around waste and wastewater. Now, I've struggled to find figures, but we have certainly in the last half century increased the amount of industry in the area, increased the number of houses in the area, increased the way that farming is done and how much water that uses. Yet I can't find in the last half century much data on increasing the amount of supply of water or increase of volume of the reservoirs. And I think that we equally need to plan for supplying water, because the answer is not pulling it out of aquifers that they take hundreds or thousands of years to refill. So I think we need to be working on water capture and be able to use that in the supply chain. And I'd like to hear that both sides of how planning think that we can do something about this, and whether South West Water think that supply is something that is an issue, because I think that possibly some of the hose pipe bans that we've had recently are more over the supply and the capture, not marrying up with the massive growth of consumer usage.
Okay, so just a couple of things to that. So just now with regards to our water resource management plans, more than happy to share the links to those, and they'll tell you what our long-term strategies around supply, not just beer, but they are, it is broken down in terms of areas, so you've got to get that site. as I said previously, we've done a lot of work recently, so we are not in North Devon, but we've just brought on 2 new water resources in Cornwall. So one at Hawkstor and one, and now we've just literally brought on a Blackpool pit in a repurposed quarry, which has given us, additional water resources available to us. We're always looking at those opportunities to do that. You're right in what you're saying with regards to, it does link with some of the growth you're talking about around industry and some of those other things. The reality is consumption has gone up as well. And obviously we've got lots of pilots and schemes going on. We've got some actually in North Devon where we are trying to look at what we know as healthier homes. So trying to be smarter around some of those things, trying to install water efficiency devices, trying to help customers to use water in a different way. Because you're absolutely right, you've got 2 options. Either you limit what you're using, or you've got to try and find some more water from somewhere, and you then, exactly as you say, got to store it and everything else. But that's a very expensive way of doing it. It's not saying we shy away from that, we absolutely have to, but we have a number of strands in play around trying to help our customers manage water more effectively, and then where we need to bring in new water resources online as best we can. And those 2 resources I've talked about have both been brought on within the last 12 to 18 months. So we've got those provisions in place, but you're absolutely right. We talked a lot around waste today. That's clearly in the public domain, and lots and lots of coverage around that. But you're absolutely right. Water resources are precious, and we do need to make sure that we manage them as effectively as we possibly can. As I say, going back to the situation we found ourselves in at the end of summer 2022 was a sequence of events that led to that point. Around increased consumption, hot weather, we weren't getting the refills that we would normally get as part and parcel of our normal refill process. And in addition to that, we've got a number of sources. We take water from rivers as well. Some of those are limited in relation to the amount of water that's available. From an environmental perspective, we get limited then in terms of what you can take, because we obviously make sure that there's no environmental impact of what we're taking away. But more than happy to share it just as a start at the 10, sharing the waste management plan, and we can go there with a further conversation if you want to try and get some, some of my colleague experts in the room to really give you a bit more flavour around it.
Well, I feel for the people of Cornwall, we're rather elected to represent the people of North Devon. So what is the plan on increasing perhaps reservoir capacity so within North Devon?
So at the moment, I think very confident to say we don't have a plan for, because we don't think we need it, and it's part of our plans. As I say, those are part of our longer term planning process. So it's not just a case of bringing on extra reservoirs. As I say, we did have a problem in Roadford. We know we had a problem in Roadford, and we've addressed that, and we've got a plan in terms of making sure that we keep that topped up. And we keep being able to put water in that space. So we've done other things around the North Devon area to allow us to move water around from our existing assets to get water in a more effective way around our network. So apologies if it came across that I was trying to suggest we sort of Cornwall, we're not sort of Devon. That's not what I was trying to say. What I was saying, I was trying to give you some examples where when required, when we've recognised some of those real challenges we've had. We have addressed it. If that then subsequently transpires in the North Devon area or any other area, then clearly we will look at all options open to us to make sure, because we've got an obligation to provide wholesome and continuous water supply to our customers. That's an obligation we've got to them.
Then may I touch on the bugbear of the hose pipe ban? The government legislation says quite specifically that the water provider should give reasonable remuneration to its customers during a hose pipe ban. I don't believe I got any in my bill, and I've talked to a number of people who haven't had a rebate for that 2022 hose pipe ban, and it does cost them people money because they've got to wash their cars somewhere else.
I'm more than comfortable away from this call away from this meeting to have that conversation. I get on the point to content.
I'm just encouraging a greater supply level by noting that there should be penalties which I haven't noticed being.
We as an undertaker have statutory regulatory things we need to do. If for whatever reason you missed that process, feel free to have a conversation, and I'll get one of my somebody else to speak to you from that part of the business to understand what happened.
Yeah, and that would help us because we could signpost other customers to those mechanisms as well, which I think would help.
Okay, John?
Thanks, Chris. Thank you. Just remind members the items around planning consultation. We can try and keep the items do tend to spread into other areas, but obviously the item is around planning.
We have
consultation process.
I know, yeah, thank you, John. Yeah, thanks. One final question from Councillor Maddocks. Did you have your hand up?
Yep.
Did I not? Oh, right, that's it.
Not this time.
I think Panic wanted to come back on my initial question, they were nodding, so
Is there anything planning?
Just simply, picking up from what Ian said earlier, there are issues, there are matters we can look at, such as water efficiency. We could look at preparing a policy, especially on that within the local plan.
Yeah.
And then maybe ever. Thank
you.
That's good, thank you, thank you, thank you very much. You're not putting your hand up, are you?
Well, just on that point then, you just suggested that there's potential policies that we could be looking at. Is it possible for that July meeting just to have a list of what those potential areas could be that will be explored?
So that's up to the thematic groups, Peter, isn't it? Isn't it? It's up to members to decide. Produce a list. It's our local plan. Yeah, so.
Could we have a recommendation from the officers who have experience in that area?
But it will come through the local plan review. So
Okay,
it's not something that we can't put policies in place in advance of the local plan review if we're driving them through the local plan process. If they will come out of, so they'll be set out in the new local plan. So it's the preparation of the plan where all of this policy development needs to happen. And that's, and we've touched on a different area here around water supply, which we can also take into account. And I would be expecting that challenge and drive to come through those thematic groups we touched on earlier. But it's not going to come forward in advance. It will come forward as part of the preparation of the plan.
okay, thank you.
Right, members, I think we've come to a stage here where we can just say thank you very much, all of you, for coming. It's been really, really helpful, and I'm sure members will agree. And we're very grateful for your attendance and South West Water, Ian. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for seeing all of
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. International.
I'll do that now. Bear with
Item 6, and welcome to Mark. Mark, I'll hand over to you, but obviously you've done a major report to full council, didn't you, about all the new machinery?
Yeah.
So I think, as far as members are happy, that is, it's just the general report on the waste and recycling situation.
Okay, yeah, so, thank you, thanks for having us. We weren't entirely sure what you wanted to talk to us about. So, as you say, we had quite a good debate, I think. That's fine. Sorry, that's not criticism, it's just genuinely, we're here to answer questions.
Yes.
As you say, we had a good discussion, I think, at full council when we presented the
That's right,
capital works scheme. So what we thought we'd do tonight, Paul's kindly prepared just a short PowerPoint, which is a recap of what we're doing in terms of capital works and the reason why we're doing it. I think we'll just say where we are in terms of getting the work started. And then I assume you may want to talk to us about our plans going forward for the future once we've got
our infrastructure up to standards and where we want it to be.
Thank you.
So shall I hand it to you, Paul, to just quickly flick through?
Thank you.
Hopefully this will be familiar to everybody.
Good evening, members. Okay, so just a quick recap on the Bridgeworthy recycling project. Consists of two main parts. Part one is capital building works, and part two is a new baler and associated conveyor system. Where we are now, so we have agreed, or just about finalising the contracts for both projects. We have to issue them both at the same time because they're linked together. We need to, the building company needs a big dig hits for the conveyors, for the baler. So we need to make sure the timing is right, so the baler is delivered once they dug the pits. Just to keep the timescale down, if you like, so we're not sat in months and months without being able to use it quickly. We're probably looking at about 4 to 6 weeks before actual proper building work starts on site. With the building company, Pierce Construction, looking to start bringing equipment down in the next few weeks. One thing we have done so far with the planning roads was to be with the dormouse habitat we have. Due to the seasonality of it, we had to get that done by the end of May. So we had a company called Seasons Ecology, which has been on site this week, fitting new dormouse boxes around the site to replace the habitat we're about to remove. And that would be removed not this next week, week after. So the last few days of the month we'll just squeeze in at the end of May, where they'll be removing 1.5 metres of stretch along the side road, just running down to the bank, which is mainly grass, but there will be some hedge as part of that. But that's the plan, is to get that all done before the end of May, and then the building company's free to start with the major building works after that. So the next section. So that's a short.
Okay, click into the only one.
Okay, so just to go a bit further into part one, building works will consist of upgrades to the drainage system, which was part of the EA requirements. A building over the glass bay, which again was an EA requirement, which a lot of other authorities are having to do as well. A fire suppression system in the main hall. Funding around the process hall, so if there is a fire, we need to contain that fire water. A new modular building for the office staff around the back, and a new weighbridge located outside of the operational yard to separate our own recycling vehicles from the 44-ton Arctic lorries, which will give them a bit more freedom to come throughout the day, where at the moment they're just restricted mornings because it's too busy after time to have all those traffic movements together. So the new baler, it consists of a new 12-ton per hour baler. So depending what material we're baling, it can do it a lot quicker than we currently do. The sunken conveyors will allow us to do minimal interaction requirement. The guys can unload straight from the vehicles onto the conveyors. They'll then get taken away, get sorted into its relevant material, and get sent to the baler to be baled. The advanced optical sorting equipment has got lots of different settings, but we're going to use it to separate our plastics. Currently, we just send out one plastic material as mixed plastics, and we don't get a great price for that. But if we can separate things like HDPE or other things, then we can attract a greater price when we sell the material. Yeah, well, that's the last point. It's just to separate the plastics into different streams, which will help with our income generation. And you can see that very well. The designers have done it in green for some reason. But that's our plan for the new modular building around the back for the office staff. Obviously, it's slightly upgraded to what we've got at the moment. At the moment, the toilets are in a different building. In the new modular building, we've got toilets in the same modular building with a meeting room as well. So that will provide capacity for all of our existing staff. That's the latest plan of what the depot layout is going to look like. New weighbridge on the right-hand side, new modular building in the top right-hand corner. One-way system for all our vehicles to go in and out of the process hall and unload. So it should be a lot safer and a lot quicker than what we're currently able to do at the moment. This is the layout of the new baler. So it's going to be over one half of the processing hall, which will allow the guys to come in and unload cardboard, paper, and mixed plastics. And then they can drive through the process hall to the new glass bay, textiles and electrical waste, so they can just make their way around the system unloading as they go. It should be a lot safer and a lot more efficient. It's just another image of the new baler and the conveyors. So in the middle, you can see the bays where the materials will be unloaded. The black line going down the middle is a sunken conveyor into the floor, which takes material to the baler, which is at the bottom. On the right-hand side, all the plastics are taken out round the back, if you like, and sorted into different types of plastics, and then they'll drop down into the bays below the optical sorter. And then when we're ready, just flick a button and it'll send that material to the baler to be baled processed. So challenges you are going to face during the process. Obviously, we are handing over the car park at the back. It's about 30 spaces, handing that over to the builders so they have a little compound so they can leave vehicles, equipment, tools, things on site. So we'll have to find an alternative just to make sure we've got enough parking. What we did during lockdown for COVID, we asked the drivers to come in onto site, and all the loaders would pick them up in town, so it saved them all having to come onto site. So that might be something we do again, just to make sure there isn't too much of a strain on the parking situation here. Obviously, once the porter cabin that we're in at the moment and the toilet block is knocked down, the office staff are going to have to be rehoused upstairs in the main building. So we think we've identified a couple of locations upstairs where there is capacity. Spoke to IT, there's no problems there. So things should run smoothly from an admin staff point of view and IT.
So you don't need new offices then, there's capacity elsewhere. Savings.
We'll be occupying the extra room, so that knocks out a meeting room.
You see John's eyes light up when he's thinking of saving the money there.
Okay, obviously the two main ones are any effects on collections for the customers. Obviously, we want to make sure we can continue collections. That means our vehicles need to have space to unload when they get back here. So obviously, while the builders are working on the glass bay, we'll have to utilise our food waste shed to store glass in there. And the same with all the other materials. As the builders are dealing with each material they're working on, we'll have to store that in the alternative food shed, just to make sure that our recycling guys can continue unloading, ready to go out the next day. As a backup, we have identified a couple of other options, one of which would be in Deepmore. They're more than willing to take our recycling material, just to make us having to, try and store it, find somewhere for it, things like that. So hopefully we won't need that, but it's a fallback position if we need it. Continuing operation on the site, to be able to process the material. So the idea is the existing baler will just keep going as long as possible. And then the plan is once the new one's in situ and working, then that same company will take away the old baler, just to make sure we can continue processing the plastics and cans and steel. Keeping that income generation going, because we don't want to lose this is going to cost a lot of money, obviously, the project, so we don't want to lose any income from loss of sales from the materials that we bring in.
So your new baler will be in the same position as the existing one then?
No, it's going to be further over to the side, so so that allows us to keep going as long as possible.
I was a bit worried about it. I thought, if you had to stop what your turnover time would be, if you had to stop and wait for the new one to be put in.
Yeah.
You could get a little hard, couldn't you? Yeah.
Could be.
Thank you very much, Sir Paul. Which we have some discussion points, questions, if that's okay. Did you want to add any at this stage, or will you come in, Mark?
Well,
If I
thanks for that, Paul's a good kind of reminder.
Yeah.
I think crucially, things to remember are the right at the start, the fire suppression, dealing with water runoff. You know, we talked about pollution earlier, so we put a duty to make sure we have a fire that everything doesn't go into the stream. Beside us, it goes down into the drains, is stored and then taken off site. So and covering the glass bay, they're all not really gaining anything from those other than making sure that we are a compliant facility. And you know, everyone is having to do this now, and we need to get those works done so that we keep our permit from the Environment Agency, which allows us to operate up there. So we haven't really got any choice to do those. Picking up on your point about the new layout, we've sort of seen that this is an opportunity to deal with some of the current congestion and queuing times that we have, and sort of safety issues with lots of people crossing over each other. So we've looked at some opportunities to try and improve the operation as well as deliver the stuff that we have to do. If that makes sense. I think that's really the key points. Then that's the first thing to remember. A lot of what we're doing is we are just having to do it, and now going forward, we need to make sure that we can bail quickly, efficiently, in line with the funding streams that the government are telling us that we have to collect. Paul and I were both on a DEFRA webinar yesterday, a national kind of webinar, talking about the government's simpler recycling reforms that they were hoping to bring in. Hasn't gone through Parliament yet. They're hoping to get it through before the summer recess, so we wait to see if they can do that. But everyone around the country is a bit like us. We're all sort of on tenterhooks. We've tried to line ourselves up and get the kit in that we need to make sure that we are going to comply with what we think is going to become mandatory. But there's only so much detail that's coming out from DEFRA at the moment. So we are well positioned. We're as well positioned as anyone else in the country. But we hope there aren't too many curveballs that come out of simple recycling. One of the things that is really interesting to note is that there is going to be a minimum requirement now to pick up black bins every fortnight. That's the minimum. So any plans to go 3 weekly, get those for now. We had colleagues up from the Mid Devon today coming to have a look at what we're doing here. So they're kind of in the same boat as us, but obviously they've made that big jump into 3 weekly bin collections, which have had, I think, a positive result on their recycling rates. But now they're in a bit of a fix because they're going to have to undo that again, really, and hope that the government give them some transitional funding to help them get out of it. So all around the country, it was a fascinating debate yesterday. Lots of people posing challenges and sort of saying to DEFRA, we don't think this will work. I felt for the DEFRA staff that had to deliver the messages to us because probably a difficult crowd. They did a good job. Obviously, they're just delivering the messages from central government.
Okay.
So it's a bit of context for you and some of the challenges.
Three hands up. Councillor Wilson, trustee.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think it's going to be a really good development for recycling that we do. A couple of questions. One was, I missed when the work was going to start. Did you say when you had a time schedule?
We're still waiting, aren't we? The builders have said they'd get it to us this week, but it's Thursday night and we're still waiting, so we're fingers crossed it'll come in tomorrow. But the general plan is they will probably start in the next 4 to 6 weeks.
I think it's like all projects, you try and line everything up so that it all works as neatly and as well planned as possible. But inevitably, things happen that you're not expecting. So the biggie for us, we've lost a month because National Grid had some concerns about our supply up here, our electrical capacity. So I think around November, it was established that we didn't need to do any infrastructure works in order to, because we've got a little substation up in the hedge down the side there. Then probably around February, for whatever reason, National Grid came back to us and we're looking at the power draw on our baler and started to sort of suggest over concerns that we might actually need to increase our power supply up here, which would have required a new substation, which required extra power cables coming up from the other side of the main road, across other people's land, so third party consent we needed. So as you can imagine, this was after we presented to you at full council as well. So it actually was March. But anyway, I'm very pleased to say that after lots of quite intense meetings with lots of very clever electrical engineers, I think probably somebody got a decimal point not on our side, on the page. And the conclusion was, we're fine here, which was good, because that could have delayed us.
Understood that.
Yeah. So consequently, our original kind of programme was to have everything that was going to go on in the process hall up to a point where we could stop works in the process hall, giving us a free run at August, which is at the busiest time, minimum disruption on the rounds, but obviously losing that month due to something that was unforeseen, bits construction, are having to sort of go back and tweak the programme. Anyone that's done big major capital programme will know it's not easy to find, so it's critical fast. And as Paul said, there's a dependency, an interdependency between the baler contract and the construction works, because the baler contract requires the supplier to mobilise a team of 6 coming down from up country. They've got to order all the baler parts, quite big bits of kit, and what they don't want is delays, because once they've mobilised, it's very costly for them to unmobilise, and then there are penalty clauses for us and the PSs to consider. So we're just taking our time to get the programme completely right, and then as Paul said, we were hoping maybe we'll get something tomorrow. If not, it'll be next week. And then at that point, we'll sit down and we can talk to all of our staff about parking instruction. We can talk to the crews and explain which parts of the yard and which parts in the process will be likely to be affected when. And we're trying to phase the work so that we maintain the service. But as Paul said, we've got contingency plans and backup plans that we're thinking of if we need to use them.
You touched on what my main thought, which was August, summer holidays.
Yeah.
We know that it's a really busy time and it's very stretched for refuse collection, especially in the seaside resorts. It's really important. So I was just wondering how you were thinking about managing that. So when people might be on holiday and see a really stretching time.
Yeah, it's been a bit of an exercise in logistics for us. So our parks team, when it came back in house, we had them set up in the end of our food shed and put a mezzanine floor in, and they've been camped in there for the last couple of years. But they've actually started to grow as the parks operation got a little bit bigger and bought new kit in. So we've moved them out again. So they're down at the old dairy, and we've also got a little space for them up at Marlborough Cemetery as well, which actually has worked quite nicely, because we've got sound centre projects now in basketball, which is pretty good for the parks team. We're going to move some of the other stuff, so I just use technical terms, up the food shed, which creates a gap where we currently unload food waste. And then what will happen is if we lose a section of the process, or what we will be, because they can do it in 3 phases, we can actually tip some of the stuff that normally goes into the process or at the end of the food shed, and then contractors will come in and pick that straight up from there. I think that's going to work. Yeah. So I know what I'm doing. So this is all Paul's work. He's put it all together, and his team.
And there is a couple of other things. We said to the builders, we'd like to try and keep the process all clear when all the recycling work goes on in August. So they've got other bits and pieces they can do, like the new modular building, the new weighbridge down the side road, and the The fire suppression system needs a big water tank and pump house, which is going to go down the slide by the Shatty Wash. So there's lots of things that builders can do during August, but that won't affect the actual operational side of it. So that's what we need to finalise.
I've got one final question is, will all this new equipment mean that those of us who are doing recycling can put something different or additional in our recycling boxes in regards to plastic or anything, or is it just going to be the same stuff that we give to you?
At the moment, there isn't any plans to change what we collect. But with plastics, the only thing we don't collect at the moment is sort of black plastic and film.
Cartons.
Yeah, and Tetra. Yeah.
Tetra.
So, we haven't got any plans at present to change. But like I say, once everything's done, built and in place, it is capacity, there's no reason we can't look at other options.
Good point, though. That sort of goes back to what I was saying about the simple recycling and the reforms that have been proposed. So when I said we're really well, there's lots of authorities that aren't collecting separate food waste, for example. They've still got to make that transition, and that's by next year, or 2026. There's some deadlines that have been announced now. So everything that we know we've got to do, we can collect up here and Vale using that new kit. We've gone for a very expensive baler that's very adaptable, so hopefully that allows us some flexibility if government suddenly change their mind on what they want to do, which could happen. But at the moment, it's not going to change what we're collecting and the way we collect it.
Okay.
What it does, what it does, it allows us to process a lot quicker. Because you do to it's 12 tonnes per hour. Whereas at the moment, I think we process about 2 tonnes.
Yeah.
So it's
Huge
6 times quicker. Now, obviously, we know 3 weekly collection is now being looked at, but it's not likely to happen. But this does allow us to look at potentially getting material in from other sources to process, because the capacity will grow because the machine can obviously process things a lot quicker and not cleaner. So I'd say, as well as potentially in the future, it might be adaptable for other materials. It hopefully will allow us to process more volume of materials, and that grows the volume going through and obviously creates potentially additional further income streams. So that's where we really see the benefit. And obviously the one we currently have, we've had for quite some time, and it's quite a huge sticking glass to put on it, which obviously is being repaired and
still found a few elastic bands.
And a few elastic bands, but it's done a remarkable job for the amount of usage we get. But obviously it's at that point where we would need to replace, and this gives us potentially capacity to grow the amount of volume of material coming through other sources, and that benefits us financially as well as operationally from our recycling credit perspective.
Yeah, excellent.
And just part of the process for the baler, the procurement process, what that is, a modular system. So if at some point we do need to add additional materials or additional parts of the kit, it should be fairly straightforward to unbolt things, separate them a bit, slide new bits of kit in. So that was all part of the contractor's aims when they put the tender together.
That's good, thank you. Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Chair. Could you expand, please, about income generation? I've got no idea how much Lord Devon gets. I don't want specific figures, but generally, how much income generation is generated from recycling? And you mentioned, because of this new baler, we should be able to increase that. How much are you anticipating the percentage increase or financial increase would be? One question. Second question, if I may, Chair, is what are we going to be doing over the next 12 months to increase our recycling there generally? I know you've just said that you've got no plans to go into Tetra Paks and black plastics, but we're still not in the top quartile, I would say, of recycling. Well, why not, and what we're doing about it?
So I start the first bit on numbers, and I'll let the guys come in the detail. So currently there's an income from the materials that we get. That income price is quite volatile, so it can obviously go up quite considerably. At one point, we're getting £1 million from our selling materials per year. We now get around 600,000. It has been lower than 600,000, so it can fluctuate quite greatly. At the moment, we're getting about 600,000 a year. We also are part of a shared savings arrangement with Devon County Council. So by having made recycling changes and less going into landfill, the county council benefit from that because it's less landfill cost. We get 50% shared savings of that. So we get around 340,000 a year in that arrangement. Plus the amount of recycling that goes through based on the tonnage, we get recycling credits, and we get about 600,000 a year from recycling credits. So in total, there's about 1.5 million pounds worth of income we get from recycling. The opportunity that's there is we could look to get, obviously the shared savings arrangement potentially could grow. It's a 10-year arrangement that does come to an end in 2026, but we are looking in discussions with the county about an extension of that, because ultimately we will make investment into recycling materials, recycling vehicles, our collection methodology. So we hope that there'll be some continuation of the shared savings scheme. So that potentially could grow from the current 340,000. The level that could grow could be our recycling credits and our recycling material, because if we get increased volume coming through of material from maybe other third parties or through trade recycling growth, etc., then they're the two sources that can grow. So the current 1.2 million we get from recycling sales and recycling credits is where we could see growth. The processing we talked about is potentially going from 2 tonnes an hour to 12 tonnes an hour. So the capacity could be 6 times greater or another 5 times greater than what we currently get. So that's where I suppose the opportunity is. There obviously is a capacity in terms of processing staff, and obviously the current processing staff would have some capacity to take on additional material because the machinery is obviously doing things a lot quicker. So therefore, there wouldn't be too much additional overhead cost to actually receive that additional income coming through. So that's where the opportunity is. I suppose the key thing then is how do we source that third-party material to grow? I think we touched on when we had a conversation at full council that obviously we've had some initial conversations with neighbouring councils about potential for recycling to come forward. Those conversations are still ongoing, so there might be an opportunity there to have further material coming this way. And likewise with other recycling, to take material, say coastal recycling, opportunity to maybe pick up some of that material as well. That's where the opportunity is.
Exactly, thank you.
The types of material and how we may go about that in the Lobsters chair.
I think the challenge, the way you describe that, we're not in the top quartile. However, we're in the top, certainly the top half of the country in terms of our recycling rates. Not doing too badly for the whole North Devon. The difficulty is, in terms of income, as John said, the market's quite volatile. We can't control the price that contractors will pay for commodities. That's out of our hands. The other challenge for us is, one of the obvious things we're going to look at to try and up our recycling rates is to re-look at 3-weekly black bin collections. But that looks like that opportunity is going to be taken away from us by central government. That's statutory guide. There was a debate yesterday as to whether, there was, I think it was Manchester on the call. They actually said, we're not going back. We're on 3-weekly. What are you going to do if we say we're not doing that in Manchester? What are you going to do? You're going to shut us down, and if you do that, who's going to take the waste? So, and the poor legal rep on the other side kind of undenied and sort of said, well, there's a debate as to what statutory guidance, or that I think the legislation says you must be mindful of the statutory legislation. Well, is it statutory, isn't it? So that's going to be really interesting. And I would suggest we let some of the bigger regional authorities play around with that like with us. We'll try and
They can have that easy.
Save money again.
But I guess the point is the goalposts do keep shifting. So we have to try and anticipate what's going to happen, which is a bit difficult. Things like Tetra Paks, it may become mandatory for us to start collecting Tetra Paks. If that isn't the case, because I think that's in the frame for about 2026, we will have to bring in new kit there because we haven't got the kit to do it here at the moment. But we will be forced to collect. Plastic film is another one that might start coming our way as well, which we don't collect at the moment. So on the one hand, it was kind of, you know, fairly towards the end of last year, they said actually we're going to give a lot more freedom to the local authorities to collect. You know, these are the streams you must collect, but we're going to actually hand it all back to you guys because you know what you're doing. So you collect it the way you want to. It's up to you whether you do curbside, whether you do COVID. But some of the other challenges, I mean, you're seeing in the news the deposit return schemes that have been introduced. So that comes in 2025, compulsory for, I think, the whole of the UK. And I think when we were informed about it by DEFRA, they said that's good news for the local authorities because it means there'll be less rubbish out there. That's kind of what they said. That's the only benefit to local authorities. The concern for us is that one of our most valuable commodities are plastic bottles. So if suddenly you can earn money or you're charged extra for purchasing a plastic bottle, which is what's going to happen, extra producer responsibility, that's something else that we'll see in the news. There'll be an incentive to take your bottles back to where you bought them from or to a central collection point or a reverse vending machine. Paul and I are meeting with the local partnership tomorrow, sort of like a government organisation that helps us try and work their way through some of the new legislation. We're saying, okay, if the knock-on effect to us would be that potentially there'll be less plastic going to people's domestic waste because we don't give them £1 back on their bottles, but if they take it back somewhere else, they'll get £1 back. So we might actually see a decline in, you know, we can process more up here, but there might not be so much in boxes. It's just a concern that I raised it yesterday at the forum. So the way around that for us is for us to put our hands up and say, look, we want to, you know, is there a contract or is there an opportunity for us to be the collection authority that empties all of these new machines and so what's the how do we get to the table? How do we get to be part of it? So hopefully we'll find out some more detail tomorrow. They couldn't really give us a very clear steer. They've got a framework in mind. They're setting something up called DMOs. I think that's a democratic organisation that will control how the vending machines work, how the collection points work. Who makes up the DMO? That isn't clear at the moment. Is it going to be the private sector? Is it going to be public sector? Is it going to be or the elected members? Who is it? We don't know. But it is also coming in 12 months. So all we can do is keep throwing our hat into the ring and say, you know, we are going to have capacity up here to bale more stuff that we could sell. So we need to try and entice, I think, as John alluded to, perhaps some, you know, other partners and organisations to bring some of their recyclable materials up here, and then you know we will see the benefit of when we sell that on. What that will do for our recycling rates will be interesting because some of that won't be domestic waste, so we can't count it as part of our recycling rate. So for us to improve our recycling rate is not an exact science, and it's going to be very, very challenging. But we're on it. We're thinking about it all the time. We've got some ideas, but nationally, everyone is in the same boat. All right.
I think Councillor Bushell and Councillor Jones, then Councillor Wood.
You know, I tried really hard here to keep it all on point, and I think I was going to use your acronym stuff so I could ask whatever I wanted. But thankfully, the questions on the optics and what we can, additional products, I think you're probably on that, and you're doing the research just in case, so I won't ask those. The families I've spoken to will be very thankful that we're keeping the 2 weekly bin collection. Because the households like mine, it doesn't matter if I put mine out once a month or once every 6 weeks. You know, you guys don't have to go to the effort of dragging my bin up. I don't put it out. I think in Norway they have a situation with the deposit returns where the bins that they have in their town centres actually have like a tray on them. So if you don't want to take your glass bottle, plastic bottle back to the vending machine, you can put it on the bin. And then somebody who sees the financial value can go around collecting them and taking them to the vending machines. So I will see if I can find which country, I think it was Denmark or Norway, one of the two. But it was flagged that for low income or homeless people, that was a good incentive for them to, you know, take things to the vending machine so you don't get things dropped on the streets. When we're talking about streamlining, I did think that perhaps members could save some of your officer time if we were able to access the database for missed collections. So if we have a comment, and obviously you know that you've just sent me this data, if we have a comment from somebody saying, this is my house, I've missed 10 collections in a row, which is not ever going to happen, but we could then just log in and go, well, the data that we're seeing isn't lining up with the person, and then we would then ask the question of the officers. Whereas if it is lining up, we can give the procedural things like, yes, well, if your collection is missed twice in a row, we then reverse the round to try and make sure it's not just because you're at the end of the round. And I don't know, we obviously don't need to edit that data. We just need to be able to put an address in, just sort of see it, and then we can do a little bit of your job, which probably frustrates you with us saying, this one house is complaining that this isn't right, and then the data reports something different.
Well, Councillor Bushell, I appreciate your offer of help. It's because while we were tonight, all I'd say is that, yeah, particularly at the moment it's pretty good. It's about as good as it gets. We you know, our complaints are down massively on this time last year. We've actually since January, I think every month we've got less and less complaints. We did a little bit of ground remodeling last year, you'll remember, and even though it wasn't major, it was a small remodeling, and it kicked off. And for a lot of you, it was your first experience of councillors where the wheels come off, and you pain. So it's kind of, you know, every cloud has a silver lining. It's a good experience for them, but it probably didn't seem like it. So we don't want to be doing that every summer. Well, I certainly don't, you know, because I've got a mortgage to pay. I hope to stay at the authority for quite so many years yet. But what I don't want is to go through every summer just expecting that it's going to be pretty chaotic, because it doesn't take that much actually. It's only a few rows to suddenly have 500 or 600 residents all jumping at the bit to say what the hell's going on with their collections. You know, even though in the bottom over 90%, about 97% of the collections are all being done very successfully. You know, because it's such a vast scale, 47,000 addresses every week. You know, that's a good sized football stadium packed out. So that's how many addresses you're going to. But one little corner of that stadium not being served properly, you know about it. It's there.
Yeah, so Councillor Bissell's question about this data.
Yeah. So
can we just log in and put somebody as a
no,
just make it so we love to help you.
We're doing part of the sort of last tweaks that we're trying to, you know, I think what we've addressed, we've done a lot of work. Most of the fleet now is you know, we've got a high proportion of new vehicles compared to old ones. So that was a big issue a couple of years ago. Lots and lots of vehicle breakdowns. But
Mike, I've never heard you run around a straight question quite so much. Normally you just have a 3-word answer.
Well, I'm trying to put it into context for you, because it's a complex operation, and one of our biggest frustrations is people sitting there, and this isn't meant to sound disrespectful, but saying, you know, why don't you, if you leave it to us, we'll tell our residents that we'll do the round backwards next week, or we'll all come back in 3 days' time. Doing that creates absolute chaos, because we don't have, you know, a reserve fleet that's just sitting there waiting for it to go wrong and you send them in. You know, we have to stick to rounds, and sometimes you know, even a crew trying to be helpful and going off to help their friends out who are struggling around. It's great, it's really good sentiment, it's good teamwork, but if they don't tell the office staff what's happening and they don't mark it up on Bartek, we lose track of what's going on, and then it's very difficult for us to spot it, because it is like sort of air traffic control down there, probably less sophisticated, but we've done a lot of work with the crews. We've got the new vehicles in now, less breakdowns. We've invested in drivers. We've recruited more drivers, so we don't have this ongoing driver shortage. We've got new Bartek units, the handheld devices, because beforehand lots of them wouldn't work properly out in the remote areas. We've invested quite a bit of money in sorting that out. We won't be tweaking the rounds again, just these small tweaks as you develop new housing estates emerging. We're constantly monitoring the rounds to make sure we've got the right vehicles out there. And the last bit of the jigsaw really is it's customer complaints and how customers report things to us. So, because what happens a lot is we'll be well aware that a street's being missed. And it could be because somebody has parked the car and you can't get a lorry down there. Simple as that. And suddenly 200 addresses can't be reached. So that's why we put the alerts, or the supervisors put the alerts on, so that when a customer tries to say, well, bin hasn't been collected, they will get a pop-up that says, we're aware your bin hasn't been collected, this is why. Or sometimes, in some cases, we don't know why, but we will update you at 4 o'clock, so you know. And here, and ideally, here is our plan, this is what we're going to do. But
Mark, we're running out of time.
sorry, so
Just at the time.
so we're looking at that system, but members, best thing you can do is report issues through customer services rather than coming to
We
us.
do have 2 more members that
Okay.
bring up.
And then 2 more items.
Philip Jones and Councillor Bullitt, very quickly.
It's just on the same point, because we've asked for this for government several times, is, first of all, well done, thank you. It seems to be working and it's brilliant. You're about to go through the summer where you have challenges, and you're also about to go through moving things around.
Yeah.
So the challenge for us is when we come under pressure, it's the same point, we don't necessarily know. When we had issues earlier in the year, I did my own sort of undertaking to work out how serious and where the problems were, and then brought them back to you. But it's on Councillor Bushell's point. Can you provide, whether it's through government, probably, a report for those meetings that just gives us an indication of how many complaints are coming in and where they're coming? So we just have an idea. So if someone is complaining in our area, we know it's just a one-off and we don't need to worry about it. Or is there a wider issue? At the moment, we have no visibility. And you guys know how best to do that. You know what systems you've got. Is there something that you can do to give us that visibility and understanding? Even if it's every few months. But at the moment, we have nothing.
Oh, certainly monthly updates on numbers of complaints and hotspots, that's fine. But
That would be great. That's what we want.
the challenge, because I think what you would almost like that daily basis where, you come in and report incidents and miss things as they're happening, that wouldn't really help us very much. I think. So I think we get monthly updates, don't we, from Andy? We can let you see those, that's why.
If we promised that we wouldn't make any promises to, may I just, I'm trying to delineate. So if we could have access to the data, just so we don't waste your time, so we could just pop in a house number, a postcode and go, we can see that.
You can't share that.
Just because we don't need to know the person's name, we all can see that.
I think, Chair, obviously, from what Councillor Jones is saying, obviously some monthly or quarterly updates. Number of complaints. That gives you that sort of vision of what's happening out there. Where
I think that
giving you access to databases is slightly concerning because obviously there are data protection issues. Not that we trust you, but obviously we do have to be mindful of data protection rules. So I think if members are happy with that, we can get the team to look at what monthly information could be provided.
I think
members
will be happy with that. Yeah, lovely, thank you. Can I go to Councillor Bullitt finally?
Okay, well, just to say, on the new system, and it's considerably better. I mean, it was a software issue, wasn't it? And you change your routes for your crews and things. Now it's all sort of getting sorted out. I mean, personally, I don't get any complaints anymore. I've loads and lots of them. But my question is, just going forward, I think doesn't your food waste still go down to Exeter? You don't deal with it here anyway.
No, it gets taken away, it's going to Cardiff for the time being.
Have you ever, going forward, have you thought about using that food waste to generate your own power? Because like you were saying about your substation there and everything, have you looked into generating your own power by the food waste?
We haven't at the moment because we're in a contract with Devon County, so they direct us where to take our food waste.
Yeah.
Can't remember how long that contract's running for, so while we're in that contract, we just have to take it where Devon County tell us for the time being.
We did also talk about whether it would go to a biodigester rather than being trudged halfway across the county.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we haven't really looked at processing it up here ourselves because we're really tight for space already. John's already and Paul both have talked about the shared savings agreement, so that works really well. That helps us work with our partners, the county council, who are obviously disposal with the collection authority, they're the disposal authority. So it's important for us to be part of that network thing because it's worth about 150 to 100,000 a year to us, and to be part of that agreement. We're going back to Codford now, aren't we? Because there was some works going on down at the centre at Codford, which meant our food waste was going to be taken up to Somerset by Devon County's contracted for a little while whilst they completed their works at Codford. I understand those are complete now.
It just seems to be waste like lorry miles and things when it's on site.
The government are in this simple recycling reforms. There is a requirement to process food waste in certain ways, and then some of this with digestion. It's in there.
Yeah.
Can I just say, I've just agreed with a councillor to ask you one teeny question.
Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
It's not actually a question, it's just on the food.
Half a
waste.
minute.
I'm surprised how many people do not put food waste things out, and I still think it's more to do with the bags. And I was quite surprised that we're now saying that we can put food waste in any bag and it sorts it out. I don't think that's been brought to the public. I know there's one thing on social media, but I think we can do a bit more to get across to the public that you can put the food waste in any bag we want, any type of plastic bag, and it doesn't matter. That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah, that's correct.
And other people have got that message.
Yeah, all
They've done that, and you can do something about that.
Yeah, you can do some more comms on that.
Yeah.
The comms is really key actually going forward, to make sure it works in the community to educate.
And also, Chair, we talked earlier about growing the volume of material that comes through. We'll be doing more comms after the part of the project anyway, so things like ship doing, we'll make sure that's being emphasised through that comms message.
Yeah, I think that's the key to it, to get more people to buy into it.
Absolutely.
But can I say on behalf of members and all of us, thank you, Mark and Paul. It's been really, really helpful, very interesting. Possibly when you've got your new machine working and it's all bedded in, maybe in a few months' time, and update for us. Yeah. I would appreciate that. Yes, great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And so, always come back on Sunday.
Sorry?
On Sunday. Can we have a look at them?
He's working, councillor, for sure.
Give you a van.
Oh, look, I'm not allowed to go into waste disposal because my mind will come out again. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, members. It's just gone 8:30. Item 8 is dates and times of future meetings, as you see on your agenda. Then we have a request by Councillor Jones, if we could amend the dates of some of our meetings. It's impossible for him with his role as the parish councillor with it.
I think that because we've had these special meetings like water quality, agriculture and dentistry come, it's kind of jiggled around the way we attend the committee, hasn't it, a lot?
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of freed us up to go and tweak the other dates a bit as well, or almost they don't go out to too much out of sync with the other council processes. I think it's, reasonable to do this.
Yeah.
What is it, John? Yeah,
Thank you.
you happy?
Yeah, I mean, the key thing, Chair, is obviously some of the dates obviously follow reports that are coming to strategy and resources. So obviously they have to go to a certain date before they get
Yeah,
to. report.
yeah. So that, I think Kelly just made sure.
Kelly's looked at those
I've done
dates.
essential proposals,
Yeah.
so it was just to check that members were happy with the dates that
Yeah.
I was proposing.
Councillor Jones?
Yeah, can I just say a huge thank you, Kelly, for looking and trying to make that work. The biggest challenge I have is that Wither is my main marriage council meeting, fell on every single one of those days.
Yeah.
So I would have tried to make both, but it would be crazy trying to drive afterwards.
Mm.
So if you're happy to change it, I really appreciate
And
it.
members happy with that?
Do we make a motion or to move it on?
We just need to just check if members, I just want to make sure the members have checked the dates I proposed on page 9 of the agenda.
Yeah, thanks, Minnie.
Yeah.
All agreed?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, I
lovely.
appreciate that.
Kelly's updated that for us, haven't you? Okay, yeah.
Sorry, Chair, just very quickly, I'm sort of new to this process as a new councillor.
Can't use it anymore.
No, I can't use that anymore, it's been a year.
Yeah.
I'm new to this committee.
The councillors are here.
Yeah, we sort of, it feels like tonight we've sort of gone the way towards doing what it says on the tin, which is developing policy around water, but the public meeting was back in February, and we're looking at something coming back to us in July. Could I suggest that the members who are leading each of the other, there's another, 1, 2, 3, 4 that are planned for the rest of this year, that give some thought as to how we expedite that process of using the evidence from those meetings to develop policy, which officers, which lead members, which committee chairs
Continue
we need here.
ongoing.
Well, it's really so that we can clear the decks of one thing before getting on to the next, otherwise we'll end up with a huge backlog of stuff and no policy developed.
Yes, yeah, quite right. Councillor Jones.
I do wonder, we discussed it earlier, whether this subject is so broad, so fundamental, that we should remove it.
Which subject?
In terms of water resource management, waste, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Whether I spoke to Torridge, and we're trying to organise a meeting with them, it's got challenging, but we will organise a meeting with them. They have a separate working group on that subject, and I do wonder if this subject is broad enough that it should have a separate working group. And maybe that's something we should include on the agenda for discussion next time.
We know of this committee.
Remove it.
A subgroup of this committee. Already suggested.
Yes.
Or a completely separate working group.
With the joint planning policy committee or something.
I just feel like we could, it's already taken up a lot of time, and there's other areas we want to talk about. I'm just throwing the idea out there, whether this sits neater in its own separate thing that's feeding into something else. Should it be, we've discussed in a simple way that it's going to continue forever. So should it exist somewhere else rather than in this committee?
An ongoing group.
Yes.
Bigger issues. And John. Johnson and so forth. I know.
I suppose that, I mean, we talked earlier about, obviously, there's some thematic groups that obviously will contribute some of those things to the local plan discussion. So those depends where you see potentially other groups contributing to. There's some of the work could be contained within groups. Some of it could be discussed here at policy. But depending you're looking to get at the outcome of those discussions, because you don't want to set up a working group for the sake of a working group unless it's not going to benefit. It depends on whether you see it benefiting this committee to continue that discussion.
I mean, I'm sorry. Yeah, I agree with what Councillor Jones. Councillor Jones said, but the trouble is, I realise that whenever members come up with bright ideas like this and set up a new group to do something with the best intentions and lots of energy, it drags in officers to support it, and there's very few officers to look. They've got 2. like we had hundreds earlier, but I mean, there's not really, the same officer capacity that used to be, because I used to work here, there were loads of people coming out our ears, and now there aren't.
The staff was severely cut.
So we need to be very,
10 or
we
12 years
need to,
ago.
we need to be able to, make sure that we can actually deliver anything. If we do make a change.
My concern would be resources.
Yeah,
Because if you
that's
had a
it, staff
separate,
resources.
if I can just understand, are you meaning a separate subgroup to look at all of these special meeting things that you've been talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, so if we were to do that, then
We need a clerk,
I
wouldn't we?
I wouldn't have the time myself. My time is taken up.
Time is full.
My time is taken up by
So we
this
need
at the
to-
minute. I wouldn't have time to.
The
do that
idea is
work.
good though.
It's great.
I think it's already becoming that, but maybe we park it for now, but I'm suggesting that.
Bear it in
I
mind.
think the point you made earlier is important though, because they say you had a couple of topic areas that you don't just want to park them, and also you've got further ones coming forwards as well. It's about, I suppose, managing that time that you've got and getting the best out of the subjects that you have chosen. And whether that means some of the latter subjects going a bit further down the road, maybe, but no, I think that's something maybe you need to consider as a group. As council leader.
Yeah.
You know, those 3 in the first period, and then maybe another 3.
Yeah.
Do you want to do a thin touch on 6, or actually do you want to do 3 really well? I think that's the key thing to consider.
And I think that's the key, might be working closer with Trowbridge, because they've got exactly the same issues as we have. If we have more involved, then we can spread the load.
It'd be a joint working group, I don't know if that's
Yeah.
a.
I mean, so I've just looked at, I've been reading the answers that have come back on the agriculture theme, and not quite so much, but an awful lot of those touch on planning as well. And it may be that these public meetings and this evidence is something that on some of these groups just feeds into the joint local plan. I know we've got one at the end of the year on transport. I mean, and that's, all of that is going to be planning, isn't it?
And you don't want to duplicate, so you don't want to duplicate the work that's going to come out in some of the thematic groups of the local plan as well.
Well, that's right.
Because you're considering it in one group and then missing the opportunity to feed into those thematic groups. I think that's a very important point. That there are groups already set up that potentially will cover some of these things.
Yeah.
I think as Councillor Prowse said earlier, it's how you feed into that and become members of those groups. And then that might replace some of these working groups that you might be considering talking about here.
How many are in the group?
I don't really get how it works.
Find out.
Oh.
We can find out. Get under the exact
Yeah.
thematic groups.
Yeah, I can see that. You don't want to, there's no point in doubling up, is there?
We can get clarity on the makeup of those groups and when they're planned to meet, because I think that's quite crucial to the timeline you're talking about here as well.
Meanwhile, it's 20 to 9 members, thank you. We noticed the work programme as it is.
Sorry, one quick question. It's based on what came out of the learnings this evening. Do we need to very quickly evaluate which officers are being invited to the meeting next week? Do we want other officers there? Which officers have been invited? Should there be, if it's feeding in, if we're talking about it feeding into other subjects, and we clear this evening that Tracy commented she hadn't been invited.
She did clarify that she had been, she was away.
Okay.
Yeah, she was invited, but she wasn't able to attend.
But we haven't invited any next week.
Next week.
You?
Chief executive's coming.
Yeah, the chief executive's come. What more do we need?
There's a lot of stuff on there, on the responses about multifunctional land use. Renewable energy is mentioned a few times. Class Q, barn conversions, farm, easing up planning for farm buildings. I mean, I think it would be helpful to have somebody from planning policy along. Even, yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at the answers that come in.
Where are you going to sit? Because you're going to be at right angles to the other side.
And also, there'll be, like last meeting, there'll be themes coming out from the panel and action points that you'll want to take away. So you may not necessarily have all the answers tonight, but there'll certainly be action points that you'll want to take to those teams. So we'll have a think about officer presentation, officer representation. Maybe some next there may come along, but that wide view in terms of planning policy, etc. Yeah.
Did we have an our meeting on this?
We've got a pre-meeting on Monday, so we can discuss that then. Shall we pick that up?
Yes, we have, yes, definitely, thank you.
Thank you, Phil.
Can I probably give my apologies to the coalition board for Kelly about this, because it's debatable, mayor making on Thursday. It wasn't, I'd already said I was coming in.
They can't give you a comment, they can bear without you.
Exactly, yeah.
Are you the mayor?
I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you.
I close the meeting, members. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.